Hello, I'm Dave, and in this video I'm going to be taking you through the best picture settings for gaming on the Panasonic DX750 for standard dynamic range content. Okay, so one of the first things that we're going to do is select the most accurate out-of-the-box picture preset. And by that I mean the picture mode that comes closest to hitting the standards that video games and most TV shows and sort of Blu-rays are mastered to, which is D65 and Rec 709. So if we go into the menus here, there's two modes that are pretty accurate, and that is True Cinema and Cinema mode. So for standard dynamic range, we're going to be using True Cinema for this particular viewing mode. And then after that, you're going to want to go down to the options settings, and here you'll find the important game mode. Now you want to make sure this is turned on, as it reduces any unwanted sort of picture processing or any processing that would dramatically increase the amount of input lag. With this turned on, the input lag drops down to around 40 milliseconds, which gives you a pretty responsive gaming experience. Once you've done that, if we go back to the top and we can go through the other settings. So backlight, this can generally be set to your own room environment. So if you're viewing in sort of dark viewing conditions, then you can have it quite low, you know, between 20 and 30, or if you're viewing in a bright daylight sort of filled room, then around 50 to 60 is generally very good for that. Contrast and brightness, these settings can be left at the default values. You only really need to adjust them if the TV is clipping bright and dark areas of the picture. The Panasonics generally tend to do a great job out of the box, so we didn't need to actually adjust these in any way. And the same thing really goes for color and tint here. We tend to use the advanced calibration controls to correctly, calibrate color. So the default values for color and tint are generally fine and will give you a pretty, accurate picture for an out-the-box preset. Sharpness, we'd recommend setting this to 0. Now it starts off at 50%, but this adds basically edge enhancement to the image, which can make it perceivably sharper, but you're not actually adding any more sort of raw sharpness or detail there. So setting it to 0 on the Panasonic defeats that, and when displaying a 1:1 pixel mapped image, you're just getting a nice, crisp, naturally sharper picture. Color temperature, I recommend selecting warm 2, as that is the most accurate to industry standards in terms of hitting D65 and Rec 709, which is what most content in terms of films and indeed most modern games are mastered to. Next up, we've got a bunch of settings that you'll probably want to turn off. So we've got vivid color, color remaster, ambient sensor, noise reduction, MPEG remaster, resolution remaster, dynamic range remaster, and intelligent frame creation. These settings basically add additional layers of processing, which they say enhances the picture, but what it does is color it in a light that makes it inaccurate compared to what sort of the director or game developer intended. So it might boost contrast levels, it might make colors appear oversaturated. So I'd recommend turning all of those off. One thing that you can experiment with is the adaptive backlight control. So the TV has natively deep blacks anyway, so we didn't feel the need to use it when viewing standard dynamic range content. But if you do find yourself wanting, just slightly darker blacks, then you can use the minimum setting. It's still a bit too aggressive, I find, so there's quite a lot of light pumping, so I recommend turning it off. But if you want to experiment with it, then feel free to do that. Next up, we come to the advanced settings, and here there's a few options to take note of. The contrast control you want to turn off. Color gamut you want to be set at Rec 709 for standard dynamic range content. In terms of the white balance, we'd actually advise you leaving this at default. Basically every panel is different, and even though we've calibrated RTV here, the settings that we've used may not actually give your specific set a more accurate picture, but feel free to use our settings and see what you think. This is the 2-point control. If you go down to more detailed adjustment, you get a more granular level that goes through the different grayscale steps, but there's not much point in using our settings for that, as again this varies between sort of panel. So The same thing with color management, so we've made specific adjustments here relating to this particular screen. Generally speaking, you can leave these at the default values. The color accuracy was pretty good out the box, a bit oversaturated on our model, but nothing that most people won't be unhappy with. It's still fairly sort of natural overall. Gamma, we have this at 2.2 for a use in a fairly sort of dim room. This should be fine for most users, but if you view things in a really dark environment, feel free to sort of experiment and maybe try 2.4, 2.3. But generally speaking, 2.2 will be fine. You can leave that at that particular value, which is also the default. And then you've got the option settings again. Game mode we've already turned on. HDMI content type, it's worth turning this off, as basically if you have it on auto, the TV will adjust certain picture settings depending on what input signal it receives. So if you turn it off, it will disable any additional processing that you may not actually want. HDMI RGB range. Now this basically relates to this setting on the PlayStation 4 or Xbox One. So if you're feeding the TV a limited range signal like we are here, you want to set it to normal. Or if you're feeding it full range RGB, then you want to set it to full. And this basically means that you're not sort of crushing white or dark details. So you're getting a one-to-one sort of mapped picture in terms of the actual color and general range. Okay, next up we've got screen settings. And here you've got options to sort of turn overscan on and off. We've got it set to off, which means you get a one-to-one pixel mapped image with 4K. There's no additional scaling, so nothing's cut off. Zoom adjustment is grayed out here. Screen display is just basically the OSD of the TV, so you don't really need to touch that. 3D settings we haven't actually experimented with, but this gives you the controls of how much 3D depth you want, and allows you to sort of customize how much sort of parallax you get, the different the spaces between the layers, things like that. Okay, so these are the best settings for the Panasonic DX750. Now it's also worth mentioning that a lot of these settings can be used across the entire Panasonic 2016 range, so if you've got a different TV such as the DX902, be sure to try them out, and they should give you a massively improved picture over their sort of stock normal or dynamic modes. Anyway, I hope you found this video useful, and if you did, don't forget to like or subscribe. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you next time.